As the world marks the International Day of Persons with Disabilities 2025 under the theme Fostering Disability Inclusive Societies for Advancing Social Progress. The reality inside Indian cities and workplaces tells a different story. A decade after the Accessible India campaign promised universal accessibility, and 9 years after the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016 made inclusion a legal mandate, ramps remain steep or blocked. Sign language interpreters are rare, and employment opportunities for the country's estimated 2.68 crore plus persons with disabilities continue to be treated more as a charity than as entitlement. We at the Federal talked to Muralidharan, General Secretary of the National Platform for the Rights of Disabled, will today discuss how far India has really progressed in empowering, training, and employing persons with disabilities in the last 10 years, why representation continues to lag, and what concrete, non negotiable steps are needed to ensure that inclusion is more than a slogan and is made a reality. Welcome, sir, and thank you for
Yeah.
joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this program.
Yeah. Sir, before we start, I want to take a look back at the Accessible India campaign that was
Yes.
launched a decade ago. And there were several steps, such as improving the accessibility of the built environment, the transportation system, information and communication ecosystem that we have. So it was planned to be taken to ensure that accessibility for people with disabilities in the country improves. How
Yes.
far do you think we have progressed?
You see that, as you rightly said, Accessible India campaign was launched in 2015 by no less than the Prime Minister himself. See, and it was a promise of the campaign had actually three verticals, as you pointed out. One is about physical infrastructure. The second was about information and communication technology, and the third was transport. In all these three fronts, despite the rhetoric that was that gone to this thing, lots of advertisements and campaign was more on actually on paper and media and things like that. But actually, very little has actually happened on the ground. 10 years, I wouldn't say that no progress has been made as it. There has been some progress, but the progress has been actually very slow. It has been very patchy. See, the budget after, but earlier railway budgets, you see, they had set some targets actually to achieve what should be achieved in 2016, what should be achieved in 2017, beginning with
Right.
full accessibility of something called grade A and grade A plus stations and all that. Now, all those targets have actually been given up. None
Okay.
of those targets, actually, railways themselves, rail ministry themselves set have not been achieved. And as far as other government buildings and infrastructure are concerned, actually, uh, this were actually set initially to cover only the cities, major cities, actually. Even
Right.
that, actually, access audits were conducted. Whether their buildings have actually been made accessible itself is a big question. It has not progressed to two-tier cities and three-tier cities and down below. Even those access audits have actually not gone away from the cities. It's still confined to the cities. These targets were actually reset again in 2021 again.
Okay.
Some revamping was done, new timelines and etc. were set, but still it has not been achieved. The main
Right.
problem is actually has been with the budgetary allocations actually. Earlier, if you see, after the launch of the campaign, this Accessible India campaign was a separate head in the Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities, the budgetary allocations. Accessible India campaign has a separate head. Now, a few years later, it has actually been subsumed by the schemes for implemented SIPDA actually. So it is now more, it's now more no more a separate head. That
Correct.
itself actually says a lot. Yeah. So
Right.
that itself says a lot. So there's so even for SIPDA actually, the allocations have actually gone down over the years.
Okay.
SIPDA actually covers various other things also. In the last, you see, 2023, 22, 23, the budget was around 240 crores something. The last budget actually it has come down to 115 crores. See,
Okay.
the total allocations for various things have actually schemes and projects have actually come down. So
Okay.
unless adequate budgetary allocations are there, all these things will actually be just a plain talk, nothing beyond that.
Right. So you talk about, how the accessibility of the designs of public buildings, and how that there are various regulations but are not being properly followed. So what do you think needs to be done to treat accessibility for people with disabilities as a priority, given that RPwD Act also mandates accessibility vetting right at the design stage and the pre-completion certificate stage?
Yes, yes, it does mention that. But I'm saying unless there are budgetary allocations, you see, for budgetary,
Hmm.
unless budgets are there, whatever you write in paper, whatever campaigns you conduct, they are meaningless. Even there are harmonized guidelines also. It's not that guidelines are not there, but these guidelines are not being they're not being enforced. Eh, You should act unless,
Right.
and there are no penal provisions for non-implementation. You see. RPD
Correct.
Act also, you talked about a mandate of the RPD Act, Section 44, and where the sections
Yes.
actually talk about these things. It talks about physical infrastructure, it talks about transportation, it talks about access to television and radio and media, various other things it talks about. But how are these going to be enforceable? In this section 92 of the RPD Act actually provides for penal provisions, but for various
Right.
other violations, not for
Okay. Not following the
implementation of accessibility guidelines and all things. And even
regulation.
if I have to launch a prosecution against the government or a department for not enforcing these guidelines, I have these guidelines and mandates of the act. I have to secure the permission of the government department concerned. So that
Right.
provision is there in the RPD Act. So this is not
Okay.
going to happen.
So while I'm saying, like, while hiring of differently able individuals is slowly improving, with employers coming forward to offer them employment opportunities, do we really see that there is authentic representation of disabled people across various sectors?
You see, actually, even what is coming as opportunities from the corporate sector is actually very meager or this thing. It's more in the form of actually something called what we say as corporate social responsibility thing. It's very minuscule actually. The
Right. Right.
biggest the biggest employer is actually the private sector, and it's much more the unorganized sector that employs the largest number of people. But these reservations are there only in the government sector as far as disabled people are concerned. Earlier it was 3%, now the RPD approved tax is 4%. Whether that 4% is being implemented or not is a different question. As far as I
Correct.
understand, it's not being implemented even now properly, because there are various, you see, the law itself actually permits exemptions in various situations. So various people can be exempted from undertaking various for being eligible for various jobs. The law itself mandates, has provisions for that, and this
Right.
exemption was actually we had actually objected to at that point of time. That's a different issue, but
Right.
this is not being implemented properly. Disabled various categories of disabled people do not find themselves in the workforce in this government departments. That's one thing. Secondly, private sector is the major employer, you see. So we have been actually since our inception in 2010, founding of 2010, been demanding that this reservation should be extended to the private sector as well. Unless
Right.
that is done, the point that was made by the government and various representatives they continue to make till now is that reservation in private sector is not there for other sectors as well, like scheduled tribes and OBCs and other. It's not there, so it can't be extended to the disabled as well. But we say the disabled have to be treated as a separate category. Their needs
Okay.
are different. They are more marginalized than the, and it is a cross-cutting issue also. You will find
Right.
disabled in scheduled tribe, various other things. But unless it is extended to the private sector, you cannot see. But this is this even if reservation is not extended, you see, you can have. like in France or Germany, various countries actually has this additional cess that
Okay.
private sector has to pay in case they don't employ a certain number of disabled people. So
Uh-huh.
that additional sales can also be, yeah, this one of the suggestions that we made, that
Mm-hmm.
if a company does not employ disabled people, they are liable to pay an additional such ty-
Right.
such 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 types of tax reforms need to be introduced to actually
Mm-hmm.
enable employers to actually force them to actually employ disabled people.
Right. We already talk about, the challenges that are there and the limitations that are there in employing people with disabilities. There's also this report by the Observer Research Foundation 2024, and the data shows that only 23% of disabled women are employed versus 47% of disabled men. So, do you think, 10 years after the Sugamya Bharat campaign that was there, why do you think gender is still rarely part of the mainstream accessibility conversation and opportunities when we discuss the opportunities? So, what can make a difference in this particular case?
See, Sugamya Bharat Abhiyan was never gender friendly in that sense.
Hmm.
It doesn't talk about gender at all in any case. That is one thing.
Right.
Second
Hmm.
thing is, it's not a question of disabled women alone. Women
Hmm.
as such, disabled, non-disabled, whatever, they
Yeah.
themselves are at the bottom of the ladder. This thing is, I'm saying it, general women
They
also
need to
are
be
not,
treated
they
with
don't, they
much
don't
more sensitivity.
uh,
Hmm.
yes, they don't get that much opportunity as their male counterparts in the case. It's the same with disabled women as
Hmm.
well, but much more in that. You may be right in the sense it's much more as far as disabled women are concerned, because most of them, because of various access issues and various prejudices and this thing like that, they're confined to their home. But let us not forget that patriarchy plays a big role in this. Unless
Correct.
patriarchy is dismantled, we cannot make a much radical progress.
Right.
Having said that, we also need to understand that, like see, women get the least priority in their homes. Disabled women are more marginalized than their male counterparts. So the campaigns, and unfortunately even the disability
Hmm.
movement also, various
Hmm.
NGOs, various organizations that work among disabled people, have not concentrated their energies, have not, or
Correct.
adequate energies, actually adequate concentration has not been given to the issues of the layered barriers that actually disabled men face. It can
Hmm.
be unsafe transportation, it can be inaccessible healthcare, and various
Hmm.
exclusions and various other restrictions that are imposed by the families. So we need to actually target these, and disability organizations actually have to take up the issues that disabled women face, and they are brought into the mainstream disability movement, and only those voices, once they're heard, can actually a change come about.
Right. So, lastly, I would also like to touch upon, when we talk about intellectual disabilities or persons with autism, psychosocial disabilities, and blindness. These
Yes,
are seen to be some of the groups which are ignored even among the differently abled individuals community when we talk about that. So,
yes.
how can we have the narrative and resource allocation shifted so that even, there are spaces which are sensory friendly and sign language services or mental health accommodations also get equal attention?
Even in recruitment, as far as recruitment is concerned, even in
Hmm.
employment, actually, there is a lot of discrimination as far as people with intellectual disabilities concerned, people with
Correct.
mental health conditions are concerned. Even the government also, actually, various services, they are debarred from various services.
Hmm.
Deafblind, of course, remained at the very lowest margins as far as deafblindness
Right.
and people with
Hmm.
these various sensory impairments are concerned. But
Hmm.
again, as I said earlier, actually everything actually uh, um boils down to political will. Everything boils down to budgetary allocations. Unless
Correct.
those allocations are made, they have to be backed up with allegation. Whatever be your policy initiatives that you put in place, unless they are backed by budgetary allocation, these cannot be happen. So
Right.
sufficient for that. So you can talk about sufficient training, sufficient training to be given to even existing staff. Actually, they can
Yeah.
learn sign language also. All of them need to learn sign language. It's a language in after all. You also
Right.
recognize it as a language. So that can be given. So, but for all those things, actually, the you need budgetary support.
And that's right, sir. So like, even as we talk about the rights and we celebrate these landmark days for people with disabilities, I think there's still a long way to go to ensure that there is equal opportunity, there is accessibility, and they're also treated fairly. Thank you so much for joining with us at the federal,
Yes.
sir. Thank you so much for sharing your
Thank
insights.
you.